Morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Not even going to try to pretend that you don't know where I am
Well, I
because,
was about to say you're still hanging out in Prague, but this
yes,
is appropriate. It's for each set of videos. Remember, we're doing sets of 3 videos. We're going to move on to a new location. So we're still in Prague for this third in our first set here.
I have an awesome one for the next one.
I
I,
can't wait.
I found the picture last night. I can't wait. So, with that, let me just say that we're at video 70-3, which is about managing uncertainty and change. And this video is called The Fundamentals because it's about the actual tools we use to do the work of these prior 2 videos. So let me just take a second. We start with the end result, the board discussion, the board debate. And so video 70.1 or 70-1, we are calling a board debate, but it's actually the prep session leading up to at the end making a board vote in the board meeting. But it's a prep session between the top 2 people, whoever they are, and you and I take a role either as the CEO or whoever the top business builder is, and the person who has the top oversight, whether that be lead investor or it be the board chair, however it's defined in your business. But it's taking that and how do these 2 people talk through an issue that is current, that is top of mind of people building businesses at this very moment and likely to be for the next number of years because we don't see these issues, especially the ones we're dealing with right now, to be changing a whole lot. They'll change in substance, but they're not going to change uh, in the area of focus, right? It's going to be AI. It's going to be things like changing marketplace and managing that change. But what we've done then is that's video 70-1. It's the prep time right before the board meeting that the top 2 people get together and hash through their different positions and how that's actually done. So we're starting with the end point. Then we reverse engineer our way back, Deirdre, to 70-2, which we call making a decision. So it's the work that each one of those individuals did, or could be their teams if you're a very large organization, or the analytic people that are doing the prep work, or it could be those top 2 people. Because we think that over time, you are going to have so much power at your hands that you won't ask anybody else to do the work for you. You'll do it yourself using the capabilities of technology. We have a whole series of videos to show you how to do that already. So in your and my case, this would be what we would do is go to video 70.2 and we talk through how we used existing capabilities to accomplish what we think is one way to look at the prep work that you have to do to get ready for that, so that you can have a serious discussion and an in-depth discussion of the relevant material. So it points to a number of characteristics of the people that's sitting in those roles, what they have to have. So then we step back to this one. We keep reverse engineering from the end result back down. And this one is the bottom. This is the fundamentals. This is the actual tools themselves that we used in 70.1 to do the preparatory work to get our decisions made on our positions and actually make sure that we were up to date on the material so we weren't dealing with old or fragmented information when it was not necessary. And we'll go, this is the beginning of that fundamentals. We'll go through a number of tools that we use. We'll focus on the top 3, which are the 3 questions, 10 leadership characteristics, or in this case, we actually use them as role responsibilities
Correct.
as a way to check to see if you were uh, responsible in the way you're approaching this work and the decision you made, and then the advocacy position you took in the board. And then the last one is value exchange. And the value exchange is the key, it's the foundation of all business in your and my view. It's what you expect to get from the marketplace and you actually do get from the marketplace, and what you're giving the marketplace for that. Or you could think about it the other way around. A value proposition is what you're giving the marketplace, and then the value exchange is the second piece to that. What is the market giving you in return? Are they matching? And how do they differ? And are they differing enough to make your business not just viable, but growing and prosperous? So,
Mhm.
so with that, Deirdre, I'm going to turn the tables over to you and let you start going through these. Now, I will tell people before I turn it over to you, we're going to cover a lot of tools today because there's a lot of things underneath each one of these that will lead you to that. We will create separate videos that will go deeper if we think it's necessary beyond what we're able to capture today in our video that we intend to keep to at least a reasonable number of minutes or and not number of hours. So with that, Deirdre, by the way, that's much more my problem than it is yours. You're usually much more precise on this stuff than I am. Um, so if we do cut something short, please let us know, and we'll make sure if we haven't done one and we don't have one planned, we'll make sure we put it in the queue. So with that, I'll turn it over to you to get started, Deirdre.
Well, thanks, Tom. 2 points before I jump right in. The first point is that these are not academic models. These are the models, the tools that we use and have used for years in working with the businesses that we're building. In other words, these are tested, we've revised them to become even more useful, and we keep updating them as we encounter new information and new factors and new technologies and so forth. So we're not just presenting something at a high level. This is what we do. Second point is that all of the tools we present, but especially the first three, which we'll try to cover today, are interrelated, that you use one to build the other. And I'll point out as I go through the discussion of these tools where they're specifically interrelated, although I'm sure that you'll be able to build the connections yourself. Now, the first one that I'm dealing with is value exchange. It's the one we've actually talked least about in videos 71 and 72. We've talked a lot about the three questions and the leadership responsibilities and just alluded to value exchange. But I want to give it its proper place because it is the most important concept I've found in building a business. You know, Tom, that when we've worked with our students or worked with clients, so many of them have built wonderful plans, and then they forget the basic monetization. How are you going to make money? How are you going to build a cash flow? And that's what this value exchange is. Most people are familiar with the term value proposition. An entity proposes that what it's offering in the marketplace has this value. That's a good beginning. But I keep telling my students an entity may propose, but it's the marketplace that decides. And unless the marketplace agrees with your proposal, agrees that your product has value, there is no value. So everything depends on the marketplace, which is why we talk in terms of the value proposal, put something out there, and the value exchange is how you get the return. For the first type of return, there are actually three basic categories of return, and then I'll go a little deeper here. The first is the opportunity. It's the value proposition, the marketplace likes it, and they give you money in return. That's your monetization. And it's because they see value in this product. Um, it's the basic, unless you have this, unless you have your opportunity value exchange, you don't have a company, you don't have an entity here. The second type is a slightly higher level. It's what we call the investment value exchange. Frequently, a company in creating what it's offering has to either make an internal decision to invest money in an initiative, or it has to go externally to gain the money to create this product that it's going to offer. And if you get the opportunity value exchange, if you get the monetization, then you've proven the investment value exchange as well. This is basic ROI. Did you get an exchange for the funds you invested in developing this product? And that's a very important thing to learn because it factors into the decisions you make when you're building your strategy, when you are coming up with how you're going to approach the marketplace, when you're, in terms of what we've been talking about in 71 and 72, making a decision, for example, to rebrand. What funds are you putting forward to do this rebranding? Are you getting a return for the funds that you put into the rebranding? Basic ROI here. And you have to try to learn to anticipate that in your marketplace. The third kind is at an even higher level, and that's what we call investment and leadership value exchange. And that's the value that the institution itself, the entity itself, and the leader himself, herself, brings to create more of an exchange. Perhaps a very simple way to understand this is to see that many women will buy products from women-run businesses as long as they see the value in the product. If the value is in the product and they have the option of buying a product with that value from a business owned by a woman, many people, many women particularly, will buy from the woman. Similarly, with the institution, this is where branding becomes so important. If you're going to be out looking for a place to have a meal, you trust the brands. What's the brand of the restaurant? Do I trust that this franchise of this brand will have a meal that is like the meal that I want? That's an institutional value exchange there. So you're putting all of these factors together when creating a value exchange in the marketplace. It's the product or service itself that you're putting out there. It's the investment you make to create the product you're putting out there. And then it's the other aspects like your brand, like your ownership, like your leadership that backs up the investment and the product itself, all of these creating the totality of your value exchange. So it's a basic concept that you have to put something out there and get something back to create a value exchange. But there are many levels that increase the value of this value exchange in the marketplace. Now, our three questions, or I'm going to expand this to our organizing structure questions, will help you figure out all of these levels of the value exchange. Now, an important point is, and this is something you and I talk about a lot, that you can't just put the theory out there. You have to implement the theory in your strategy and in your strategy execution plan. So you can go through the academics of saying, yes, here's my value proposition, and I'm getting, this is how I expect to monetize it, and this is what I expect to have to invest, and this is consistent with our brand. So I expect all of this to work out. But then how do you build this into the actions you take? And this is where something like your go-to-market plan becomes absolutely essential for building your value exchange in the marketplace. In your go-to-market plan, you set out your aspects of product development. You do your product market fit work, which may be the most essential work in understanding whether you're creating a value exchange, whether what you're putting out there is what the market will provide a return on. And you will have to likely do some adjustments, as we've always had to do, Tom, in creating a product market fit here. And then your sales and your marketing campaigns need to be aligned with your product market fit and your expected value exchange. And then, of course, your customer service and support are frequently what create the basic thing in the marketplace that people will pay you for. So all of these aspects have to be built into the specific actions you take. This is, again, not an academic exercise. You bring it down to the level of what you specifically do day by day to create the value in the marketplace. So that's a basic overview of the value exchange. Let me stop here, Tom, and give you a moment to say a few thoughts about value exchange.
As you started with, we think this is the core concept. You have to truly understand value exchange to understand business, because it is, what is the marketplace giving you in return for what you're getting? You are giving it, right? And it's that exchange of value to whatever degree that you need it. Early on, you're going to be pushing towards the investment development work that you talked about, the market development work, where you're getting less. I should say it the other way around. It's hard to do it this way, but I'm going to stop trying to do it with my hands. You're giving the marketplace more than it is giving you, because you're developing the marketplace, and somehow you're not able to properly either explain, demonstrate, or yet be able to pull from the market the extra value that you need to get to keep your business viable. And that's what product market fit is all about, so that you can find out where that is, and then yield the growth that drives the profitable growth. Now, there are two other ways to look at value exchange. One is it's either hard or soft, meaning, right? Meaning you can point to it and it's returned to you in hard return. Dollars, for example, or any currency, it's returned to you that way, or it's returned to you in some form of in kind that you can equate to dollars for yourself. The second one is soft, and this is where you are you're getting something else back that you can't really quantify, but it has value to you. This is where, for example, you will give a customer a beta version and ask them to return information to you that'll help you with product market fit, or help you with your development, or your refinement of your product development work, or your product marketing work, but it's hard to quantify. And so that's a beginning of what you and I would call soft. And I'm sure you'll add to these, Deirdre, when you get back to going through this. Then there's another set of concepts to think about, and that is what you and I call direct and indirect, and then I call the third one self-actualization. So this is, what is it that you're expecting for a return? Are you expecting a direct return, meaning I'm selling Deirdre to you, I expect you to return to me? Or am I selling to my dog over here, Xena? I'm selling it to her, but you are giving me the return because I'm doing that. Because for you, your value exchange is, I'm going to kind of subcontract Tom to deliver good services, good works to Xena, and in return, I will fund Tom. This is what a traditional not-for-profit does. And Deirdre, you'll get into this in more detail. But this is what we call an indirect monetization. I'm selling here, but I also have to sell Deirdre, because I have to sell Deirdre on my ability to do good works in that marketplace, and that those good works that I'm doing have this amount of value that she's willing to give me, which is made up of investment return, right? Because she's going to give me more than I'm actually going to use in the period, because I need to keep building the business, and then return in actual dollars. But in this case, I'm not getting any money from Xena.
Hmm.
Self-actualization is where you're just doing it for very difficult to articulate and justify results. That you're just going to donate it to, or put your money into some fund that's going to figure out themselves how to take and do that. And you're not going to require the hard connection back and prove to me that you did that. They are doing, this is the anonymous donor that doesn't want any reporting, doesn't want to be known to that. They just want to contribute. And as long as you are viable, that's what they care. So a lot of their return is self-actualization. You could actually say that when an investor invests both types of investment into a company or a not-for-profit, both the dollar investment and the investment return money, um, they're doing that investment return with a little bit of self-actualization. They said, Deirdre did a due diligence on me, and she feels pretty comfortable that with the appropriate level of risk, I will end up being able to deliver those good works to Xena. That can be for profit, for non-profit, or for a profit-making company that is in their early stages and getting VC money. That is an indirect value exchange. Hopefully, then it does return direct value exchange. When you exit the company and I then return Deirdre way more than her investment in me, and I hopefully collect way more than my investment of time and effort into this business. So there are multiple ways of looking at this value exchange equation. That's why you and I like to make sure people grasp that this is key to how a business functions, whatever the makeup of the financials are, right? Because there are different ways to be able to make this work. And so that's why you and I tend to not make as much of a distinction in for-profit or not-for-profit. We're more concerned with how are you making that exchange? And if that exchange fits one of these categories, then that's what you become, right? So with that, Deirdre, I'm going to turn it back over to you and now let you take it to the next step.
It's very important for people to remember that every transaction is embedded in the concept of value exchange. That might not be articulated, but it's understood there. And so then the question comes up, how do you know what value exchange? How do you know whether there will be a value exchange? And this is where our tool, now we've been referring to this as 3 questions. It's actually more than that. In fact, I'm going to start calling this tool the organizing structure. And the questions in our organizing structure are broken into 3 basic categories of work. The first is assessing the situation, the second is making decisions, and then the third is accomplishing the work. That is gaining the value exchange, trying these tools together. So, and all of these questions, this whole structure helps people just see clearly. And it also, by the way, and I'm going to raise a word here, Tom, that sort of underlies a lot of what we talk about. We don't always make it obvious, but here's the word, it's risk. It helps people see the risk involved because everyone is always calculating risk in there at some level of tolerance. And then what these questions also do is connect strategy and planning to the value exchange. Now, we call this the organizing structure because it's actually the organizing structure of what we call our whole leadership and management model. We're not going to saddle you with this in this video. That's going to be the topic of our next fundamentals video, along with any of the topics we don't get to cover in this video. But understand that when we're talking about assessing, deciding, and organizing, we're talking about the flow of work in an organization leading to a value exchange. So with that, let's start with the assess questions. And these are our basic 3 questions of what am I missing? Are motivational aligned? And is time my friend or enemy? Let's dig a little deeper here. What am I missing? It's so easy to think of all of these questions and just answer them off the top of your head. Oh, I'm not missing anything. I'm up to date on everything, so all of my decisions are right. Stop sign, red light. You can never think like that. What am I missing calls for deep analysis and deep observation of all aspects of your marketplace. That your customers, your competitors, your business and social factors, the emerging technologies, everything that you're going to face in your marketplace, your industry factors, everything there. Then it also takes a deeper look at your competition. What are the capabilities of your competition? And here's one that people tend to forget, and that's who could become a competitor. And that's something we're seeing increasingly these days, where technology enables someone you never thought of, someone not on your radar screen, to all of a sudden move into your marketplace and provide a competing value in a way that you can't match. That is a major factor. And we've seen, by the way, sometimes when this happens, a whole industry is overthrown. Classic example, of course, is publishing in Amazon. But it's happening, and that happens many years ago, but it's happening increasingly today with the advent of these emerging technologies. Technology, what am I missing in terms of technology? Do I understand the technology enough to be able to build a strategy here, to be able to make sure I'm creating a value exchange? And then a basic question is, am I assuming I can make money at this? Are there things that I'm missing here that would keep me from making money? This is your basic value proposition, value exchange question. You may be missing that everything you're coming up with here to answer this question keeps moving you away from the possibility of actually monetizing what you're doing. And we're seeing that increasingly with some of the rebranding issues we've mentioned in the previous issues, with some of the other strategic decisions we're seeing in the marketplace. So that's your first question. What am I missing? And it requires a truly open mind, your mindset of clarity, to answer this effectively. Second one is, are motivations aligned? This is not just internally, but also externally. Internally, it has to do with your ability to execute. And it's not only your ability to get all of your people in leadership and managerial roles to execute. It has to do with something we'll get to soon, which is, are your resources aligned there? Do you have that? But we'll get to resources more in a minute or two. But it's also important to make sure that you're aligned externally. We see right now, for example, some of the big tech companies promoting their AI tools, going in and selling, and people buying, perhaps without asking the questions. Are their motivations aligned with my motivations? Am I accepting their sales pitch without looking at my organization and seeing whether this is right? This is a major question of motivation. But there are other outsiders, your suppliers. With this whole shift in the marketplace, are your suppliers and you talking about the same thing? They may be trying to substitute products, and you may think you're buying the same thing. Are your motivations aligned there? Are your platform participants operating? Most of us now have moved away from pipeline distribution to platform distribution. Are the people on your platform aligned with you in terms of what they will do for you, in terms of your distribution? Are your customers aligned? Will they continue to want what you're going to offer if you change what you're offering? And this ties back to some of the rebranding issues we mentioned in the first two videos in this series. And then the use of technology. This is something that I've had to explain to students and to clients repeatedly, that just because you know you are using a new technology does not mean that your customers are coming along. Odds are your customers will not shift their processes simply because you're using a new technology. So is there an alignment now in terms of your customers' ability to even use what you're offering if you change your technology? This is a critically important point that seems to be overlooked in the marketplace significantly. So you've got to really look at everything in your marketplace to make sure the alignment's there, and then work to make sure that you can recreate the alignments you need. You may remember that in videos 71 and 72, We kept talking about maybe this is the time for you to look internally, to do the work internally, to make sure that you will be able to use these new technologies, that you will be able to present yourself in this uncertain marketplace. This may be what we're talking about here. You may need to do the work internally to make sure your motivations are aligned so that you're prepared with whatever the marketplace is throwing at you. You're prepared to act when the time is right. Which gets to our third question. Is time my friend or enemy? And we've said, sometimes it's your enemy. Sometimes one of these competitors comes in and hits you inside of the head, and you have maybe 2 seconds to react. So no, time is not your enemy. But if you're looking at the marketplace with a mindset of clarity, you see that something's happening out there. You have the time to figure out what to do, to make sure that your internal motivations are aligned, that you will be able to act when the time is right. A question to ask, though, is if I do wait, will I lose this opportunity? Now, this is actually a trick question because you have to decide whether this opportunity is the right opportunity for you. This is one of these sales pitches, like buy now at our sales price because you'll never get such a good price on these products. Well, do I want these products to begin with? That's a basic question you have to come up with. So it's not every opportunity you're going to be presented with under time pressure is going to be right for your business. So this is why this whole question of time being your friend or your enemy is really important to think through. There are some other aspects to this. One is, how long will it take me to do this right? If, for example, I want to build some generative AI actions into my strategic plan, how long will it take me to get this right? And by get it right, I mean have the right people doing the right projects, with the right results, the right goals, and so forth. That you need to make sure that you have the time that your entity needs. There are no templates for this. Your entity has to decide what time it needs to get this right. Similarly, and this is something you and I talk about, Tom, that well-performing, well-executing companies build a cadence of execution. And how long will it take you to build a cadence of execution into what you do? And all of this factors into your decisions about, is this the right decision? Is this the right strategy? Can I create the value exchange? Or what time will I need to create the value exchange across the board? If I'm going to be investing something, how long will it take for me to get to the point where I can introduce something to create the value exchange? And will that be in time or will I be missing an opportunity? And does it matter? This is why it is so critical for business leaders to have a mindset of clarity, to understand everything that they're facing here. This also points to the need to get your strategy right. And we'll be talking more about this. I'm not going to move into a strategic decision of strategy right here. What I will talk about is something that you and I talk about all the time. And this is something that we found helps students frame it, as clients help this. And this is the concept of the game. If you think about the marketplace as a chessboard, with different pieces being moved at all times, and you needing to decide to make the next move, do you have the context? Can you see what the other people making the moves are thinking? What you have to do to either counter the moves or to win on your chessboard? Or what's in there just creating chaos that you don't need to pay attention to? What do you have to pay attention to and what do you not have to pay attention to on your chessboard? So that might help people frame it a little bit. So those are our 3 assess questions. It's what am I missing? Are the motivations aligned? And is time my friend or enemy? Tom, do you have a few points you want to make here before I move on to the decide and accomplish questions?
Yes. So this is a really important aspect to keep in mind because these three questions, the missing motivations and risk, and I'm sure, oh, excuse me, time, and I'm sure, Deirdre, you're going to add the bonus question in there, which is risk. But if you just stay with, let's start with missing. What you're really looking at there is the first thing that you always do in almost everything you do. You walk into a room, you're assessing things. The same thing comes true here. If you're like me, the first thing you do in the morning is to figure out what's going on in the world and also what's going on outside. So you're trying to assess before you take action, before you do something, before you make big decisions. And to do that well, you have to have what we call feel. You have to have market feel. You have to understand what it is that what could be happening out there. You have a feel for it. You have a judgment about what it can be and how would you deal with it. So then the second one is your ability to research, because that market feel will almost always pose a question. The beauty of today is with the resources such at your fingertips, you can easily answer that question or at least get yourself going in a direction to be able to deal with it. That's the beauty of where you are today, which in the past you hadn't been able to do. And then the last piece is the judgment, because if there's a characteristic that we look for in almost every, I'm pretty much sure it's a universal thing. What people look for in other people is judgment. It's truly judgment. And if you take and decide, okay, what's trust about? Well, it's about judgment. So just think about those characteristics that you value in people, and it usually comes down to an aspect of judgment. Do they know how to make uh, decisions that fit whatever it is they're doing? The better you are at that, along with another set of characteristics which we'll go through, uh, is what allows you to, if you choose, rise to higher and higher positions in what you do. So it's those three things. When you're looking at what are you missing, you're looking at what kind of feel do I have for what I expect it to be? What's different about that? Do I understand it? Did I anticipate it? Or is it unanticipated? Do I need to do research on it now, later, or does my prior work there already I can infer an answer based on just my knowledge and having developed that feel or judgment for the marketplace. The second on motivations, it's about, first of all, you have to know what they are, and you'll never know what they are, but so I should use a better term. You have to be able to, with a fair amount of good judgment or accurate judgment, be able to have a sense of confidence about your ability to judge what somebody's motivations are. That's the first thing, and that again takes a lot of work to figure that out. And if and you all understand this, I don't need to explain this to you, but if you want an example, walk into a low-level retail store and have somebody try to help you. You know right away their motivation is not aligned with yours. There's only one part of their motivation, and that is to convince you to buy, because that's where they get a value exchange out of the marketplace. Understanding that how does that exchange process work? And okay, is it aligned with you? That's your really good partners, or your really good employees, or your really good distributors, or your really good suppliers. It's then important to align the important motivations and make sure you're aligned. A lot of the others won't be aligned. And the question you have to ask yourself is, can I work with them? Do I understand them well enough and can I work with them? And you and I don't bring up political things very often because we deal with business, not with politics. But if you want to see the um, the chess game of can I work with those motivations, that's going on. That's what you're witnessing right now with the major players in the world. They're trying to figure out we are not aligned. There are so many ways that our motivations are not aligned, but can I work with them? Right. And that's why you're seeing this back and forth with the major powers, the Russia, the China, the US, the Middle Eastern countries in their own battles. In that, can they figure out, even though they're very differently motivated, it's how can I manage something that will allow me to work together? And that's what's changing in that world right now. And it's fascinating because it is a search for that tricky equilibrium. And if you don't see it that way, you misunderstand what the product market fit that's going on right there. That, okay, I'll agree. I'll say, all right, we're going to have a meeting next week. And then I say, nope, I'm not ready to go yet because I don't think the other side's ready for it yet. That's what that product market fit is. And so people misunderstand that to be bad decision making. And in fact, it's very careful judicial decision making may be wrong, by the way, right? So we're not trying to make a judgment on whether something's right or wrong, but that's what you're witnessing there. And it's the same thing in business. You're going to have some suppliers, you have no choice. You're going to have some distributors, you have some no choice. You're going to have some salespeople, if they're really good, you have to figure out, can you work with that alignment issue? You're going to have employees that are so good at something. You have to figure out, can I work with it? And it's right on that edge, and you have to decide, do I have to take and now put them into the marketplace, which they're inevitably be working against me then. So you're looking at that same question of motivations and what is it worth to you and how do you manage that? Again, it takes an enormous amount of judgment on all the aspects of that. It's a fascinating thing to understand. And the people that do that well are people that understand negotiation in today's world really well. Just like we're trying to change how you learn in today's world, not looking backwards, looking forward. Same thing in this case. The way you do negotiations, diplomacy, all that has to fit looking forward in today, not looking backwards, or as Deirdre likes to say, understanding what's back there, and is there anything that can be used as is or can be modified to fit today? And then you've got the final one, which is what you're doing from the motivation point of view, can it work? So even if you are able to work with it, are you going to get enough return of it? So you're back to the value exchange point. Yes, I can work with Sammy. I think I can do it. Now, is it going to take so much effort on my part and so much management? It's not worth it. There's value exchange again. And so you're constantly bringing these things back together, which is what Deirdre was pointing out a minute ago, is they all work together to create a business. This is why building and running a successful business is way harder than it looks from the outside. And this is why if you see a street vendor, unless you truly understand all the aspects of what that street vendor is dealing with, it's very difficult for you to be able to judge the complexity of what it takes to make all this work. So there is just in missing and motivation, there are subtleties inside. In the missing, it's do you have a market feel? Have you developed it? Do you do the research you need to do to build on that market knowledge? And are you sharpening your judgment about that aspect of your business? And then under motivations, it's first, do you even have a sense of what they are, right? And how they fit? Secondly, are they aligned? Aren't they aligned? And then once you go that, can you work with them? Or is it going to not return a value exchange that's valuable enough to you? Right. So with that, Deirdre, I'll turn it back to you because you have one of the more interesting ones to pick up now, which is the issue of time. Right.
Well, I think I'm going to,
You're going to
in
move? Okay.
move forward a little bit here. We'll come
Well,
back to all of these tools here.
okay.
Anyway,
I would just say on time, and I'll finish this piece up, Deirdre, and then you can take it.
okay.
But on time, it's about, as Deirdre said, is it your friend or is it your enemy? And even if it's the right time, is this the right action? So it gets very, again, you have to layer back. And we won't spend as much time on time here, but we will later on. But it's just remember the distinction there is time your friend, meaning you have probably more time than you think. And then you have to judge, what am I doing when in there? Have I done enough research? Have I done enough thinking? Have I done enough judgment, feel of the market? Whatever that decision is you need to make, is it your enemy? Meaning, I don't have time. I have to make a judgment. Then you have to get into the point Deirdre made a minute ago, is then it's back to value exchange. Am I going to put so many resources behind this? If I fail, what does that feel like back to me? Right? I'm going to have made, and then I made this big investment and I'm not going to get anything out of it. That's a huge mistake. And that causes people their jobs, especially CEOs. And then it's the whole analysis on, okay, the timing is right. Am I right? Is my organization right? Because then you have to get back to the point about, have I properly assessed it? Am I making the right decision? And can I organize, execute, and deliver? So I'll round it out there, Deirdre, so you don't have to do that, and I'll let you have the rest.
Um, Before I move on in our organization structure, I want to jump way ahead to our leadership responsibilities and say that as we're describing this, people are probably saying to themselves, how in the world am I going to keep all of this in mind? And this is what we mean when we're going to get to talk about leadership responsibilities. It's the work you do to become the sort of person who can deal with all of the variables here. So the more that you practice this, the more that you work on through these structures, using these tools, the better able you become to assume full leadership responsibilities because you're becoming that sort of person. So that's jumping way ahead in our remarks here, but I wanted, I was a little worried that people were starting to get concerned that there's so much to think about here. It's sort of like, trust us, you can get there.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
With that,
Certainly, if Deirdre, if you've helped me get there, however not successful or successful I've been, you all can get there. I'm assured. I should really say at this point that now when we say we'll likely have separate videos that even come back and document this, we'll have it on a sheet of paper for you, and we'll go through it in more time and detail. All of these pieces. But for this video, we wanted to at least get you down far enough so that those of you that have been exposed to this, and there are many that have been, you can now figure out how does it fit in what we're talking about. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Deirdre, and let you take it.
okay. Remember, we're back in our organizing structure now. We've done the assess questions. We're now going to move on to the decide questions and the accomplish questions. And I'm just going to run through all of those going forward. So when you're deciding, what do you have to ask yourself? This is when you're really rolling up your sleeves and putting together your strategy and your execution plan. So let's start with, what resources do I have? This is actually a more complicated question. Of course, it's more complicated than you may anticipate at first, because we've had a lot of people say, look, I've got an IT department of 50 people. We can handle anything. Stop, red sign. That these days, An IT department, however wonderful they may be at doing the work they've been doing, may not be able to move forward into some of the emerging technologies. You need to look at what individual skills they have, what can they actually do to implement whatever technology you're throwing at them in the strategic plan. Then you have a second decision there, which is if they don't have the skills I need, can I train them? And when do I have to train them, and how do I build this training into everything to make sure I've got what I need? This is actually a very difficult question. Too many people, and we've seen this out in Silicon Valley, have decided that they just can't train the people they have. So they're going to fire all 50 people and try to bring in 50 new people who have the skills to do this work. It's a very serious question. So you can never assume that resources on hand actually have the skills you need. They may be there, but they're not the resources you need. That's why this is a very complicated question. And I've been picking on the IT department because it's an obvious one, but you also have to look at the leadership and management skills of the people throughout your organization. That frequently work is being done in teams. Do you have the managers who can lead teams? Do you have the managers who can work across silos, across departments to spread the team knowledge out there? Or are people just set in their silos? They are unable to think in a broader, different way, given the passage of information, the way projects are done in companies these days. So you really have to look at what leadership and management skills you have. And again, the question is, can I train these people? Or do I have to retire some of them and bring in the people who can do the sort of management work that I need to be done here? You really have to do a deep review. And you also have to look at the skills that your managers and leaders have. Do they understand technology? Can they talk technology? And this is not a matter of age. Some of the older leaders that we've worked with, Tom, are better able to talk about the emerging technologies than some of the younger leaders who may know some technologies, but they haven't kept up. So no stereotypes here. Look at the individuals involved here. And this also ties back to the question of value exchange, because all of your resources, your assessment of resources, are aimed at the question of, can these resources deliver on the value exchange that I'm setting up? Can they carry out my go-to-market plan? So that I create the offering in the marketplace, so that I use the investment money, so that I build on our brand here to get the returns from the marketplace that I want. And that may require your managers and leaders doing the sort of analysis and questioning that we're suggesting you go through as well. That this business is different now. Business is being done differently. And you need the people with, and this gets back to what you were just saying, Tom, people who have the feel for the marketplace. People who have the judgment in there to not only carry out their specific roles, but to understand how their roles fit in with the rest of the organization in delivering the value to the marketplace. This is where all of this, even though we're breaking it down to discuss points independently, this is where all of the points we're making come together into, do you have the right people with the skills, the judgment, the feel, the ability to execute in the way you need to deliver value in the marketplace? This is very difficult because it's going to put a burden on you as the leader to make decisions about some of your past decisions, some of your past hires. You're going to have to be able to say, what I did there was right for 10 years. Now I've got to change this. It's no longer right. That's a difficult decision for anyone to make, but this gets down to, what type of leader are you? What are your leadership responsibilities, and can you live up to them? Remember, I said all of these tools are interrelated. I'm starting to show you how they're all interrelated here. So that's the first of our decide question. What resources do I have? The next decide question's a very interesting one, which is what outcomes can I expect? Now, in video 70-2, Tom, you talked about the need to abandon a follower mentality, to develop your own mentality of what your own organization can deliver. In these days of the emerging technologies and with pressure from tech companies to build their products and so forth, they'll tell you, oh, X company did this with this tool. Stop. But is X's outcome the outcome you can expect from use of this same tool? Odds are it isn't, because your organizations are different, your resources are different, your offerings in the marketplace are different. So let's come back to the question, what outcomes can you expect in your marketplace to deliver value? You set the outcomes that you expect in terms of your business and your circumstances and what you want to provide. You have to make sure that everything is aligned to be able to get a specific outcome. This ties back to, Tom, something that you and I talked about in videos 71 and 70, that's 70-1 and 70-2. You don't change just to change. You change for a reason. You change to get an outcome that is right for your organization. You don't just change because someone else got an outcome from changing. You as a leader need to have the guts, the internal fortitude to be able to make these decisions, which may seem going against a tide, but the tide may not be right for your organization. The tide may not be right generally, frankly. We don't know that yet, where there's so much uncertainty economically and in the marketplace. We can't say that there's a tide out there really yet. So that's the very important point. So our decide questions are, what resources do I have? What outcomes can I expect given my organization as it is? And then it gets to, okay, what's the plan? What's my strategy? And you have to come up with a strategy and then an execution plan that matches your resources and your outcomes and your marketplace, the value you want to provide. Or maybe this is the time to revise your concept of the value you provide. Remember product market fit here, where you may revise that. This question, what's the plan, points to the ability of you as a leader and your organization as a whole to decide on and deliver value and therefore get the return, get the exchange. So that's why these decide questions become very important. What resources do I have? What outcomes can I expect? And what's the plan? And because we're starting to come up on an hour, Tom, and we want to try to keep this to an hour, I'm just going to march ahead and talk about the third part here of our
I thought you were going to give me a warning instead of
well,
just cutting me off. That is so impolite, Deirdre. Can
well,
I just
Tom,
say
you're
one thing about
warned,
this?
and now let me move on.
I know. I'm the one that set the hour. You're saying I'm just going to keep us to the hour.
Okay.
No. So,
You'll have
Deirdre, the only
plenty of
thing
time.
I
Okay,
know,
go
I know.
ahead. Go ahead. Take a
But
minute.
the only thing about this, the point you're making about change, right? Is this the right change at the right time? There's a subtlety underneath there that came out in 70-1 and 70-2, and that is what about what? You're making a change about what?
Yes.
Because we believe that assets not only have a value, but they have a perishability, right? I mean, it starts with your strategy and then it's cash. It ends up down at the bottom being brand. And why is it that your strategy can perish and you don't even know it's bad because somebody's already moved on from your strategy, right? They're doing something next, and you're still coming up with the one they have today. Or your money can dry up quickly because exogenous things can happen. That's the reason why we wake up in the morning and not only ask ourselves, what's going on here, what's going on in my market, but what's going on in the world that could affect all those three things. but you end up with this hierarchy of assets of the business, and we'll deal with this in other videos that require it. But that list that I gave, that is really 8 assets of the business, the bottom one is brand, because brand can, and many times will, for the wrong reasons, outlast you, for good or bad, or outlast your business. We still talk about Enron today, and it hasn't been around for a very long time. Um, and so it is, you can make decisions with less, perhaps, precision and
Mhm.
less care if they're ones that sit higher on this perishability list. You start making decisions about the one that sits near the bottom, which is, or at the bottom, like we believe brand sits. That decision you make may outlive what you expected with this change. So that's why we chose brand as the example, because it's one that people don't think about. But boy, changing brand, you have to be really careful what you're doing. So I'll stop there, Judah, because I do know that you'd like to keep this to within a reasonable hour period. But
Right.
but
And
I wanted people to understand there's another subtlety layer that we'll get into in other videos, which is these assets underneath this.
absolutely, absolutely, Tom. We're only providing
The
information up here.
first level,
We're
yeah.
working down toward it. So remember our organizing structure. We had assess, we had decide, and then we have accomplish. And very quickly, the accomplish activities are you execute the plan, but then you watch what's happening and you adjust as needed. And then finally, you just achieve the outcome. A few points along the line. Your execution has to come directly from the strategy. Ties in with what we were saying earlier about how so many people develop a strategy, but then people just go on doing the same old thing. Execution and strategy have to be absolutely wedded together for this to work. Then adjusting as needed. There are times, Tom, when you and I have checked in daily on a strategy execution to make sure that daily what's happening. Back in the old industrial age, corporations sometimes waited a whole year before assessing whether a strategy. That's so old, that we recommend when you're doing a new strategy, at least if you're not checking in daily, check in weekly. Don't let it go beyond that so you can adjust as quickly as possible to get a strategy execution on course or moving in the direction you want. And then to achieve the outcomes you need, you have to make sure you're using the right metrics. You're applying the right metrics in the right way. You don't use old metrics you used in the industrial age. You have to figure out what's appropriate now. And do these metrics apply to the outcome you want? Frequently, people don't connect what they're measuring with what outcome they want. And is this the full outcome, or have you figured out how to assess whether you've gotten the full outcome? So we'll have to go back over these in great detail. But I do want to say we're trying to keep these to an hour, and we just have so much to say, Tom, that it's hard for us to cover. We've only covered 2 pages of my 5-page outline for what we are covering here. The third tool we were talking about covering today is our leadership responsibilities. We're going to pick that up in our next fundamentals video, along with our leadership and management model. And I'll give you a slight alert that our next set of videos, just as 70-1 and 70-2 and 70-3 have been about managing uncertainty and change, at the request of people interested in topics, we're making our next set of videos about AI agents or agentic AI, which is the term that people are using, because people are hearing about this and there's just, well, so much uncertainty about it, so much that they need to be able to figure out to even have the board conversations, make the decisions, and then apply tools. And what this does is it makes our next fundamentals video, the one that we do for agentic AI, doing it for your leadership responsibility and your leadership and management model, well, very appropriate. because you need to understand how you have to think, what you need to be able to, what attitude you need to bring to this to be making the right decisions about this deeply emerging technology that everyone is talking about today. And with that, Tom, I'll let you have the last word here.
So what I will do is we will have a separate video, as Deirdre said, on these characteristics of a great leader. And we think about them as beyond characteristics. It's a definition of your role. It's your responsibility. And we use
And
them
who you
actually
are,
here.
who you are as
Yes,
a leader. Yeah.
because we use and the role you're expected to fill. And we used it as a checklist in -2 video because it was a way to double check at the end to say, am I living up to my responsibilities as the leader of
Right.
this organization?
Right.
I'll just give them to you in order quickly without expanding, just so that you have them for completeness. The first is to remain expert in your field. And you obviously understand that. If you don't have that expertise, you cannot create the judgment. You can't know what you're missing. The second one is doing your job and getting it done. It's that whole point about, will you take full and complete responsibility, not only for your organization, but what your organization does and what it was expected to do? And then think strategically. So good CEOs always think tactically, but it's, are you thinking tactically and strategically in tandem? As Deirdre said, it used to be strategic could have a different cadence than tactical. They're very close. And that means you're going to have to change, and you're going to have to change your business in product market fit areas for sure. And then it's about, how do you make those changes and to what? We deal with that in 70.2 or -2. Secondly, knowing how the substance of work is changing throughout your organization. Not only how the work of your people is changing because of all the factors that are sitting in society today and are coming or are being introduced that are creating confusion. And then how it affects what your job is changing because of the same thing. So it's knowing from you on down. It's having a bias for action. Uh, but it's what you and I call, Deirdre, considered action, meaning considered the way we just went through it with all the complexity coming at it left, right, up, and down. Um, it's about both problems and opportunities and being able to see if there are ways you can make one the other. Can I make a problem an opportunity, or am I going to end up making an opportunity a problem? And that circle is just like value exchange, right? You have to make sure you get what you expect. Um, it's building the team you need and I'll just add the next one to it, and the culture you need. And notice we say need because it's about what, not just what's going to fit today, but tomorrow,
Right.
and what fits you and the brand that you're putting into the marketplace. And this means all your customer facing activities, that it yields the brand you expect. Uh, and this is where agentic AI can really get you in trouble. And we have a number of examples about that. Um, the next one has to do with that you use an attitude of focusing on the simple, the creative, the sustainable, and the robust. That you have a way of figuring that out. It's not just innovation. It's not just creativity. It's not just sustainability. It's all of those pulled together into a whole, which is very, very hard to do, as you all know, anybody that's trying to build a business. Um, and that you know how to communicate. That's the final one. You know how to communicate to all the people and organizations and pieces you need to communicate. We have a couple of other things that work on this, but we'll leave that there. Those are the 10. to just give you a complete view of the tools we used. But as you and I expected, Deirdre, we did just the first level of these discussions. But those of you that are watching, please send us an email if you would like us to go in a certain direction, or if you'd like us to go further on some of these things that we haven't told you we will. Deirdre, it's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Tom. So long for now.